I like to read the big book and think about the history of AA and try to imagine God's part in it. And as we do that, all you can see is God. You can't hardly see anything else. You can see these human beings that were chosen to be the messengers that started our program. But you can see that they didn't have anything to do with this. The circumstances and this power and this chain of events just occurred. And especially after Bill went off with his ideas about how AA ought to be, and he was blocked at every turn with his chain of drunk tanks and paid missionaries and all that stuff. And it ended up he couldn't raise any money, and, all his ideas for the program just were blocked. And it turned out the way it was supposed to turn out. And so I think, as I look at it, God's handiwork to rescue you and I probably started in around 1912 or 1913 when a group of teenagers were assembled up in Manchester, Vermont in the summertime. A lot of them were there just for the summer. And, of course, the first one was Bill Wilson, who just was down from East Dorset, Vermont to attend Manchester Academy. And then over from Albany, New York, where his father was the mayor and a big shot in politics, almost was considered to be the vice presidential candidate at one time. Didn't make it, but he was up for that. And his son, Ebby, came to Manchester to where they had a summer home and hung out with other kids his age or slightly older, and of course he got to meet Bill Wilson. And then up from Rhode Island was a millionaire's son. The Hazard family was big industrialists. They had plants around the United States. And their son Roland came up with them to their summer place in Manchester. And then up from Brooklyn, New York was the Burnham family, Dr. Burnham and his wife and his lovely daughter Lois. And they all met each other, these kids, in social settings, maybe in a bar, maybe here, maybe there, but they got to know each other. And there began a chain of events that unfolded as a result of that brought us AA. And the first one in that chain of events, and this is why I'm telling this story so that I can lead up to the Dr. Young letter exchange between Bill and that came later on. And the first one of these was Roland Hazard, and his drinking got out of control. And his father wanted him to take over the business. He had taken over quite a bit of it, but his drinking was so bad that it was getting where he might have to be institutionalized. And they had tried, he himself and his family had tried everything this country had to offer. And so someone said, there's the best psychiatrist in the world is in Switzerland. His name is Carl Jung. If you go there, we're sure that something can be done for Roland. And so he went there and he spent a year with Dr. Jung. And Dr. Jung tried all of his techniques to cause this profound personality change. And at the end of that time, he said to Roland, well, that's everything that I know how to do. I've done for you. You understand the situation. If you start drinking again, this could possibly be over for you. Yes, I understand, doctor. Well, good luck. We'll see you. And he made it as far as Paris, where someone asked him the wrong question. They said, would you like a drink? And he said, yes. And so he just got totally ruined again and came back to Dr. Young, and he said, Dr. Young, look, I'm all messed up. It's hopeless. I'm in total despair. What am I going to do? And here's where I just read in chapter 5 where it said, no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So if you think symbolically, Dr. Young certainly symbolized all there was in terms of human power. And this is what this concentration of human power said to Roland. There's nothing I can do for you. How's that for pretty definitive? I am the leading human power on the planet, and I can do nothing for you. That is going to cause a surrender. And it did. I mean, that just took the floor right out from under him. He had never heard that before. You mean nothing can be done? No, nothing can be done for you. And then he added, now I have heard of a few cases like yours where people have had profound spiritual experiences and have been able to live a happy life. If I was you, I would try to find one of those profound spiritual experiences. And all right. And guess what? Roland was suddenly motivated to find a profound spiritual experience. The week before, he wasn't interested in profound spiritual experiences. But he just got motivated because the ultimate in human power just said, there's nothing I can do for you. And that's what hopelessness is, and that's when we begin to win. And so he went out with a totally open mind and said, where am I going to find something like this? And of course, the Oxford movement was incredibly popular. It's quite normal that someone looking for a spiritual experience would get into one of these Oxford groups, and he did. And lo and behold, he got sober and became very active in this, including using his home up in Manchester to hold Oxford meetings to pass the message, the spiritual message, to other people. And right about this time, the second in our cast of characters crashed and burned, and that was Ebby. Ebby has been just alienating his family with one episode after another, and finally, after driving his car drunk into a farmhouse and went through the living room into the kitchen on a Saturday morning and came right up to the kitchen table in the car and asked the lady of the home if he could have a cup of coffee. So they called the cops, and there's all this. So the town is going, this guy is really causing a lot of trouble. And shortly thereafter, off he goes. He's in front of the judge, and the judge goes, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to send you away for a while. Everybody's on my back. And he made one phone call, and he knew Roland Hazard was a very distinguished family. And Roland came down, talked to the judge, and said, would you release him to me personally? Well, the judge knew that was safe, that nobody would criticize him for that. And Roland took him off to the Oxford movement, and Evie got sober and got very active, and then they were transferred down to New York City, helping out with the main Oxford group, Sam Shoemaker, down in New York. And some period of time went by, and Evie thought about his old drinking buddy, Bill, and he went, paid the call on Bill, had that wonderful Saturday morning in Brooklyn, told Bill about what had happened to him. Bill was very agnostic. Bill had been brought up in the Christian church, but he didn't believe that Christ was divine, didn't believe any of this stuff. He was just, maybe. But Evie said, Bill, you could choose your own concept of God. You just have to surrender. Stop worrying about what it is. And later, after his next drunk in the hospital, Bill had this great spiritual experience after he surrendered. Went off to Akron 6 months later and met Dr. Bob, and the two of them got the program going, and off they went. And then AA took off, and of course now it's enormous. So a lot of years go by, and suddenly Bill realizes that he never closed the loop with Dr. Young. You know what I mean? He never really said, Dr. Young, you know what you started? And so he wrote this letter to him, and it was a good thing he did, because it wasn't long after that Dr. Young passed away. And he wrote him saying, Dear Dr. Young, I don't know if you remember Roland Hazard. He was a patient of yours, but you did this, and as a result, this happened, the Oxford, and now we have AA. It's in all these countries. We owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude. Now I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it said. Dr. Young writes back, oh my God, I'm so happy to find out. I often wondered what happened to Mr. Hazard. It said, what a pleasure to find out. As you may know, I can tell you now what I was trying to do with Mr. Hazard was to cause a spiritual transformation, but we couldn't use those terms back then. They would have laughed me out of psychiatry if I said anything about spirituality, but now it's okay to talk about that. And of course we all know Young was very spiritual and just saw the spirituality of man and everything. And so he said, that's what I was trying to cause. Because as I have looked at alcoholics, now we're back to this sentence that I read at the very start. You may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. And Dr. Young went on to say that what he thought alcoholics had, and this I'm paraphrasing, was a very strong longing for God. Now what if that was our problem? And it came disguised in many other ways, like lousy childhood, irate wife, all these other things, no money, terrible illness as a child. So there's something that needs to be fixed, and that's what I call alcoholism. Myself, this is just my own personal understanding, that it is a disease that only a spiritual experience can conquer. So if that is the situation, then we have these 12 steps. So what are they designed to do? Well, let's cheat and go to the end. Did you ever read the end of the book first? Wonder how this thing ends. Holy cow! And then we go back and read it. Well, how does it end? How about step 11? Conscious contact. How about step 12? Spiritual awakening. That's how the book ends. That is the point of the whole thing, is to have a personal contact. Just you. You have it. And then there's you and this new energy source that you have contact with, and that spiritual awakening. And so that's the end of the book. That's the point of doing all this. And that's what Bill said. The purpose of this book is to enable us to find a personal God. And so that's what I see the steps as. So every step that we talk about is a God step. You know what I mean? You can label them all the different ways you want. Oh, an inventory step, a past step, a future step, a peepity-pop. But if you think about it, they're all God steps, because this is the path that can enable us to achieve conscious contact and spiritual awakening. And of course we talked about what Roland had to do when he saw Dr. Young, and that was surrender. And as I said in the very, very beginning, that if one new person out of this gets motivated to take the action to get closer to your personal God, that would be the greatest reward I can imagine. We're at the end of the time. Why don't we wrap it up with the Lord's Prayer for everybody who would care to join in.